Well, for the past few episodes, we've been here at Pearl Harbor, looking at where the Second World War began for the U.S. on December 7th of 1941. Had a chance to go out to the Arizona Memorial and the Oklahoma and the Utah Memorials. Also had a chance to go through the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum and see like the bullet damage on the hangars on Ford's Island, and also go up in the tower and get like a bird's eye view of everything that happened here. Well, now we are getting ready to head out to the place where the Second World War officially came to an end on the USS Missouri. Well, gotta tell you, I am as excited as heck right now because this is a place that I have wanted to visit for a long time. This is the USS Missouri. This is an Iowa class battleship. Now, we've done a video before at a South Dakota class battleship whenever we visited the USS Alabama. And we're not going to go as in-depth on this ship as we did on that one. We're here for a different purpose, and really what we're looking at in this video is the role that this ship played in the signing of the surrender for World War II. So here as we are walking in, they have a statue of Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz with a quote below that says, "They fought together as brothers in arms. They died together, and now they sleep side by side. To them we have a solemn obligation, the obligation to ensure that their sacrifice will help to make this a better and safer world in which to live." So anyway, we're going to go in now and take a little look at the USS Missouri and its role in the end of World War II. All right, well, we just made our way up to the main deck of the Missouri here, and just a quick history about this ship. So this ship was christened in January of 1944. It was actually Harry S. Truman's daughter who christened the ship, which is appropriate because they were from Missouri, and it was commissioned in June of 1944. So the Missouri would be seeing action towards like the last year of World War II. It would take part in the Battle of Iwo Jima and also the Battle of Okinawa, where it was going to be hit by a kamikaze pilot. The part of the ship where we are standing right now has been nicknamed the Kamikaze deck. On April 11th of 1945, as the Battle of Okinawa was raging, USS Missouri was taking part in it, as I mentioned just a moment ago, and a kamikaze pilot would have been flying in from this direction right here, and looked like he was going to fall short as he was facing a withering barrage of anti-aircraft fire, and he ended up pulling up at the last second and hit right here on the aft part of the ship. Well, a bunch of wreckage and fuel came up here on the deck and ignited and caught fire. The fire was quickly put out, and they ended up finding his body amongst the wreckage, and they ended up burying this kamikaze pilot at sea. Now that was on April 11th of 1945, and you would think that that's something that would have really made the headlines in newspapers, but there was something that overshadowed it. On April 12th, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt passed away of a brain hemorrhage in Warm Springs, Georgia. But anyway, that all happened right here in this very spot. Before we move on, they have an information panel here that tells a little bit about this kamikaze attack. So here it says at 14:43, the left wing of the Zeke strikes Missouri bare inches below the main deck. And there you can see this moment kind of frozen in time. And then if we move over here, they have another information panel about this event. And we actually know the pilot of this Kamikaze plane. It was Petty Officer Second Class Ishino. And I believe that he was 19 years old. And then here's a picture of the burial ceremony with the quote from the senior chaplain, commit his body to the deep. So you would have had a Marine rifle detail that would have had a 3-volley rifle salute. Navy bugler would have played taps. And they have a spot right here showing these footprints where his body was committed to burial at sea. All right, well, I can't help myself. I can't be on a battleship and not at least mention some of the guns. So again, we went more in depth on this in the USS Alabama video, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the guns and armaments of the Missouri. But like the Alabama, it had 3 16-inch guns. The big difference is that rather than being a 45 caliber on the Missouri, or on the Iowa class, I should say, they were upgraded to a 50 caliber. And here is an example of an armor-piercing shell that they would have fired out of these 16-inch guns. So this would have been used, against bunkers or structures or other ships. And to fire it, well, you would back it up with 6 110-pound bags of powder. Okay, now as I mentioned, we're not going to be going just bow to stern showing everything on this battleship. We showed a lot more on the USS Alabama, and we're going to show more on future battleships. The history of the Missouri goes beyond World War II. It saw service in the Korean War all the way up to the Gulf War, which is really quite remarkable. But the thing that the USS Missouri is probably best known for is being the site of the signing of the surrender on September 2nd, 1945. So we're going to go up to the surrender deck now. Well, if you want to talk about spots where big moments in history took place, well, this right here is it. This is the exact spot where on this plaque it says USS Missouri over this spot on 2nd of September 1945. The instrument of formal surrender of Japan to the Allied powers was signed, thus bringing to a close the Second World War. The ship at that time was at anchor in Tokyo Bay. So right here, one of the most violent conflicts in history officially came to a close. And if we walk over here, we can see one of several famous pictures that was snapped that day. This one showing, of course, Douglas MacArthur seated, putting his name to the surrender documents. Behind him is Lieutenant General Jonathan Wainwright and also Arthur E. Percival of the British Army. They were there representing the POWs. As a matter of fact, we visited the grave of Jonathan Wainwright in another video at Arlington. And then there are several guys back there whose names are quite familiar, like Bull Halsey. Also visited his grave. Courtney Hodges, Carl Spatz, James Doolittle is right over here, and then you have the Japanese delegation here, which would include this man whose name was Mamoru Shigemitsu. He was the Japanese foreign minister, and standing next to him is General Umezu, who was the chief of the Army General Staff. But they have a few other things here that I want to show, but man, pretty cool to be standing right here in this spot. Here's something else about the surrender ceremony that is kind of interesting to me. So here we see a picture of MacArthur giving a speech at the ceremony. And the Japanese had a lot of respect for MacArthur and the speech that he gave, because it wasn't trying to humiliate them or lord their victory over them, which, I mean, they didn't know what to expect whenever they got onto this ship. But rather, MacArthur's speech was talking about the formation of a lasting peace after this bloody war. And in some pictures, in the background, you might see this 31 star flag, or rather not this particular flag, but this is a replica of the real thing. But in the background, one thing that MacArthur wanted at the ceremony was the flag that Commodore Matthew Perry had flown into Tokyo Bay whenever he had reached out to Japan to establish trade in 1853. So this was to be kind of a sign of a time of peace between America and Japan. And the reason that it's backwards is whenever they got the flag out of the archives, the other side was all riddled with moth holes and damage, and it looked really nasty, so they flipped it around. But anyway, kind of a neat little side story of the signing ceremony here on September 2nd. I've just moved up above the surrender deck here just to get a different perspective, because there were a lot of photos that were taken from this angle right here. But man, can you even imagine being one of these young sailors and being able to stand here and see this historic event in action? Must have been something else.
On behalf of Emperor Hirohito, Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu signed for the Japanese government. Japan accepted unconditional surrender according to the provisions of the Potsdam Declaration.
Here they have a facsimile of the instrument of surrender with everyone's names on it. And there were several different nations who were at this ceremony who signed on behalf of their governments. Okay, so there were the Japanese. Here are the two Japanese signatories. There's Douglas MacArthur and Chester Nimitz signing for the U.S. Also being represented here was China, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, Australia, Canada, the French, Netherlands, New Zealand. One thing that's kind of interesting to note, if you'll notice, well, there's one spot that is blank there by Canada. That's because the signatory for Canada, a guy by the name of Colonel Cosgrave, well, he kind of messed up and he signed on the wrong line. So they ended up having to make some corrections on the fly to fix his mistake and then sign their names below. So that's kind of embarrassing. All right, well, that was the USS Missouri right here in Pearl Harbor. Now, if you'll notice behind me, there is the memorial for the USS Arizona. There's something really interesting about the placement of the Missouri. It's very symbolic. It's not something that was done at random. The bow of the USS Arizona, which sits at the bottom of Pearl Harbor, and the bow of the USS Missouri are both facing each other, kind of representing both the beginning and the end of World War II, all right here in the same spot. So glad that we got to visit this place today. This is a big one that I'm checking off the list right now. But got a lot more to see right here in Pearl Harbor and the island of Oahu. We are constantly exploring and learning new things on this channel, so if you found value in this video, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell to catch all of the new content when it comes out. And be sure to check the links in the description for more content and opportunities from our partners.